Welcome to Top Advisor Marketing, where you will learn how to become a prolific online influencer, attract more ideal clients, and grow your practice. Brought to you by Top Advisor Podcasting, a done-for-you podcasting solution built just for trusted advisors. And now, your co-hosts of Top Advisor Marketing, Kirk Lowe and Matt Halloran.
Hello and welcome to another Top Advisor Marketing Podcast. Today, Kirk and I are going to talk about the evolution of the advisor brand. Now, I want everybody to remember that Kirk Lowe is the branding expert in our company. I'm going to add some color here and there, but the way that he has built this whole evolution out is really fascinating. I'm really excited about seeing what each of these different levels are and how he strings all of this together. So, Kirk, let's jump right in, dude. Where did this come from first before we dive into each of these levels about the evolution of an advisor's brand?
I hate it when you ask me where stuff comes from because I have not a clue. I literally grab a blue dry erase marker. I head over to my whiteboard, which I've explained before is one of my most favorite possessions because it's 8 feet by 4 feet. It's 32 square feet of wonderfulness. And when it's empty, I like it when it's full, when it's empty. Anyway, I just started writing what really interests me. And I think I've been thinking a lot lately about where branding has come. Like where, when I've been in the business now for 20 years, and really over 20 years, really 23 years. But owning this company for 20 years. And I've seen a huge evolution from what Advisors is doing. And in some ways, I haven't seen it evolve much at all, which is kind of, an interesting statement, I'm sure. I'm hoping what I'm going to bring up today is going to create some debate. I'm hoping that when I post this on LinkedIn or snippets that people engage in the conversation with us, because I think there's a lot of room to move stuff around. But what I've done is essentially created, at this point, 7 different, we'll call them levels, but maybe it's eras of advisor branding. And I've gone from 1 to 7, obviously. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to outline for us to have a discussion, you and I, about whether or not what was going on in that era. So we'll call it the level 1 era. I know I'm not sure if I'm framing that right, but at least it should be easy to understand. So we'll start with level 1. So level 1, when I first got into the business, branding was as simple as really a logo, a company name, stationery, and signage. It was, I'm not even sure tagline was there yet. I think tagline, I had that in 1, but I'm going to move it down a bit. But I think logo, company name, stationery, and signage, that's really what a brand was early on, if that makes sense.
I agree with you 100%. In fact, to this day, when people ask me what you do for the company, I say, well, Kirk helps you with your brand. They'll be like, oh, he comes up with logos and stuff. And it's like facepalm, right? I'm like, oh my God, really? That's honestly what you think a freaking brand is?
And that's a perfect example of what I just said, which is in some ways it's evolved a lot. In some ways it hasn't evolved at all. It's mind-blowing that, but part of the problem is that depending on what you do for a living or what your role in marketing is, there are people who will say, here's your brand identity guide, or I'm going to help you create your brand identity, which is typically a graphic designer or design firm saying, we're going to give that brand an identity, a visual identity. So they're not wrong, but then people interpret that the wrong way. But yeah, it's crazy how many financial advisors still think that branding is a logo, company name, stationery, and signage. It's unreal. And you know what? We're responsible. Hopefully this podcast is going to help them. So not much to be on 1. So 2, we'll see if you agree with everything here. So 2, I've got 5 different things. First one is people started talking about value props and elevator speeches. I guess that's really 1. So, what is it how do I position myself? What do I do? And I'm not sure early on value props were as much about differentiation as they were about clarity, helping people understand what you did as a financial advisor, understanding the role, understanding its implication on retirement, which was a term that only came out, I think, in the 60s or 70s. So that was the first one. The second one was getting public relations. So, this is what I do, and trying to get a stage, if you will, or a platform where they could say, well, here's what I do. But back then, Pierre, was really about establishing what you did, not necessarily points of differentiation or really is a brand defining commentary. So that, and so there were different ways. Was a guest expert was one of them, and then getting articles published. This one may be kind of early. I got it in level 2, but maybe it was level 3. But I put it here because I remember early on people trying to get, in papers, be guests and stuff like that. So that's the second one. The third one was print newsletters. Print newsletters were prevalent early on in financial planning, in my experience. And early on, I thought they were more genuine, authentic. And then as advisors had less and less time, there were companies saying, hey, we can do this for you. Here's our template. Advisors loved it because it was time consuming to do on their own, creating their own content, finding the stories. And then, so that really, print newsletters companies really took off at that point, doing that. Next was kind of complemented this, which was letter campaigns. So people, mailing a series of letters or letters about times of the year or events. Bill Good had a huge impact on letter campaigns with his system. And then another guy who I really enjoyed in those years, which is really the first 5 years, I would say, of my career, or even before starting this company, was Jim Cecil. And he called it nurture marketing. And he was fantastic. And both those guys had huge impacts on my learning early on. Some branding people as well. But so that was level 2. So I'll repeat those again. That was, elevator speech or pitch / value proposition, then public relations, print newsletters, and letter campaigns. Those are some of the things I remember back then.
Just so you know, I still know advisors who use Bill Good's letter campaign to this day. In fact, he was a guest on this podcast, and he was one of the funniest guests we ever had.
He knows so much, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It was unbelievable. But the letter campaigns, in my opinion, was really the beginning of content marketing, right? That was keeping top of mind into your clients by providing them with good information that's actionable.
The problem with the letter campaigns back then, and both Bill and Jim did this, is they pre-wrote everything, and advisors weren't sharing all their ideas and strategies. They were creating emotion and pain, and it was purely awareness and emotional engagement types of content. Mm-hmm. There was some, IRS, like taxes. There was definitely some education going on there, but that wasn't the primary focus or the sole focus, which it should be now. Mm-hmm. I would say, well, more so than not. But yeah, that's a great insight, Matt. So that's level 2. Print newsletters are still humming along, man. And there's different versions of that concept at play now too, which comes up in level 3. So now we're at level 3. The first thing I really remember from level 3 is websites, and websites starting to get some recognition as a marketing vehicle for advisors. The uptake was, slow but steady early on. And that's really where I started in the business, actually, was right around that stage, which was, 20 years ago. And early on, I was building websites, and the biggest struggle that I had, one of the biggest epiphanies I've had in my career, was that everybody sounded exactly the same with the information they would want to put on their website. And they really struggled with writing that and articulating that. They didn't really know who they were. Well, I'm just this. And it was what everybody expected them to say, what everybody else was saying. So there was no creativity or barely any. And that's where I started realizing these guys need brands. And that's where I started teaching myself, how to build brands for financial services. I had learned all that stuff in university, but that was a really big turning point for me as to what my company was going to be and why I'm a branding guy. It happened early in my career, and it was struggling with websites. So the start of that, what I call the level 3 era for the evolution of advisor brands. So the tagline was really one of the things that came next. And I'd like to think that I had played a little bit of a part in that. There's other people, and I'll mention them in a second. But the tagline, what did your company stand for? I will say this, didn't have a lot of depth at that point. It was just coming up with something that sounded slick and kind of running with that and letting that kind of speak for itself, which wasn't really good marketing, but at the time, that's what was going on. The email became more prevalent, and that kind of replaced to a degree. Didn't replace print newsletters. It was just another option, an advanced option, if you will. Some of the traditional marketing advisors, wanted to stick with print, but the same thing happened with email, right? Whereas people started trying to write their own. This is going to be easier to do email, so maybe I can get back into it. But within the next couple of years, the same thing happened with print as people were running email newsletters on behalf of advisors, and they got really boring and cookie cutter, right? Which happens, to this day. We know some good email marketing people who are doing that, actually have good businesses. Seminars really kicked off in level 3, which was, the start of advisors doing content marketing to a degree. The difference is that it was content marketing quickly followed by hard pushing sales, right? And there were some advisors who evolved their seminars into being more educational, and that's how they marketed them, because they realized that consumers were picking up that this was just an opportunity for you to sit there, for me to feed you, and you feel some sense of obligation to me to start selling to you, right? So when they started picking up on that, those evolved. The seminar evolved into a more educational platform, levels of level 4, I would say. But early on, you could do more selling. You could, when we did seminars, we would hire a big name a financial media person, right, who was writing across the country, who had their own radio show at the time, and we would leverage their name to draw people in. They would tee up the advisor as the best person in the area to do get financial planning done for them, stuff like that. Those were really huge. You remember those days?
I do.
So seminars, then personal branding started to kick off here too. When they realized, who am I in a seminar? Am I differentiating myself? And personal branding had a huge push in our industry from a guy named Peter Montoya. And I loved what he was doing at the time. Like any company, when you try to replicate and manufacture it, I think you lose. You have the possibility, I guess, of losing your way. And I felt like that the personal brand got a little bit too much into people's personal lives instead of what they could offer as far as their expertise. So it went a little bit too far on the personal side, which isn't a bad thing. We still want to do that with social media when you're doing podcasting, let people into your world. But the whole brand, more of the brand was based on that personal side versus who they are as a thought leader. And so I slowly didn't enjoy that as much, and I kind of used that as a leverage point to differentiate myself in branding, which is where I started probably in level 4 or 5, where I started realizing that in order to have a brand, you need to be based on your thought leadership and who you were as a person too, but you had to prove it. That's where I started introducing, I'm kind of off on a tangent here, sorry everybody, but that's where I started introducing the idea of brand depth, which is, okay, if you say you're this, now prove it. Okay, here's a white paper, here's a, and now what we're doing, which is a podcast, but back then it was write a blog post, right? It was things like that. Show that you have a financial planning process, things like that.
Well, proving. I'm sorry, let me jump in there, but proof back then in level 3. So you're like level 5 and 6, right, where you're going right there with this proof. Back then, the only way that you could prove your expertise was to drop 10 G's a month on a PR company to get on the local news.
Yes. I mean, you could have a seminar, but that wasn't a lot of credibility because everybody knows that was a sales vehicle.
Sure.
So you're right. They had to go back into level 2 stuff, which was, pretty much PR.
Yep, radio shows that you've got a huge spend on, getting on your local news and local newspapers and stuff like that.
Yeah, I forgot radio.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so radio was part of PR back in level 2. We can always edit these things to make me sound smarter, like I don't forget stuff, but I do, so let's leave it here.
Dude, we don't edit any of that stuff for you. All right.
We'll say we ought to have from time to time. But, so level 3 is, ads, things like that. We're starting to push out. And ads were really a big part of pushing seminars. So putting an ad in a paper, putting out, local paper, larger paper, doing ads on radio, things like that. Those became, pretty big then. And the idea there was that you could start leveraging your website a little bit by pushing them back to the website, because that was really your biggest, the website, even though I'm saying the website was how you proved your brand, papers and PR were how you proved your brand. Really, website was part of that, right? It was, I'm an advisor, I have my own website, and that had some depth or credibility to it. So people didn't think they needed to take it further, but that quickly evolved, and that's where I kind of built my company and my expertise around. So that's level 3 again: websites, taglines, email newsletters, seminars, personal branding, and ads. So level 4 is where we start to see some of the brand depth stuff kick in, and where technology starts to have an even greater impact on how advisors are marketing. So level 4 is blogging, right? Advisors were thinking, I got to have my own blog. And I would say that the uptake of people who started blogging wasn't really huge. And I'll tell you why: because everybody started, stopped, and failed pretty quick. And I know this because for years I was trying to help advisors start blogs, and inevitably they got hot, they got started, then they go cold, get back to it. And you can't do that. If you're trying to build an audience to listen to your thought leadership, you have to do it with frequency and consistency. And if you can't do that, it's very difficult to build a listenership, because they realize you're just in it when it's good for you. If that makes sense.
It does. And not only does it make sense, but it's showing commitment, right? And that's where, after this level here, and when you start talking about, content marketing, the people who are consuming that content want to know that you're in it with them, right? It's a mutual commitment. If I'm going to commit to you, I want you to commit to me too.
Right. Well, isn't marketing just a highly visible microcosm of how you're going to run your business anyway?
It's supposed to be, right?
Like it should be. I mean, if you're really organized in your business, why you would probably be that way in your marketing. If you really invest in stuff in your company, you'd probably be the same kind of person who would invest in marketing, and vice versa. So that's one of the things I don't think a lot of advisors, it's not just advisors, as business people get in general, which is that when you're showing your professionalism and your value, it's usually across multiple platforms and engagements and things that your company does, not just a couple. You can't just be good in a couple areas and have a really successful business, typically. I know you can in this business from time to time. Some people just have the charisma, or they have a network. They're politically connected. They're connected to a big company, and they just run with those things, and they run half good businesses and have a lot of success. I get that.
Sure.
That's not what people are looking and need to do these days. Definitely.
So what else is in level 4? So that was about blogging and commitment, but there are some other pieces in level 4 where things started to, in the evolution of the advisor's brand, things are starting to look more like they are now, right?
Yeah, that's a really interesting turn started happening. Not necessarily a great one, as it turns out, but a prevalent one for sure, which is content libraries. And, there we have Bill Good, Jim Cecil, Peter Montoya, all those guys, had contributed to this evolution to a degree, right? And Peter Montoya ended up having the marketing library, I think it was called, marketinglibrary.net or marketing, something like that. And, and there were Broadridge and all kinds of companies who had these huge content libraries. We almost partnered with a large one in Rochester or somewhere like that years ago. Yeah, huge content marketer. I couldn't believe these guys were doing like 25 million in content marketing. It's massive for healthcare and financial. Anyway, so content libraries, and then content libraries evolved right into not just having articles that you could use for your newsletter or post, on your LinkedIn channel or, send out in a letter or whatever you're going to do. They started having videos, right, that you could use to talk about planning topics, things like that. So content libraries made a huge impact because advisors who couldn't be consistent with a blog, right, they grabbed all those people because they said, look, you don't have to be a writer. You be a financial advisor. We'll share all of the expertise that we presume right? And then content libraries got huge. And guess what? Everybody knows you didn't write 1,200 articles. And when they go to your website and they see that you have 1,200 articles, those 1,200 articles aren't on a niche focus, that's for sure. So I felt like those content libraries got way out of hand. I felt like content libraries really missed a mark of helping advisors understand a niche. And the niche probably started happening in this phase too. And things weren't being connected, right? So the idea of finding a niche and marketing to that niche wasn't really working that good. Niche kind of happened throughout this to a degree, but probably started getting more prevalent when people started realizing that you can't be everything to everybody and think that your marketing is going to work. Webinars became more big, during this era, the level 4 era as well, which was because of technology, right? I didn't have to spend as much money. Is there a cheaper way to do seminars? Seminars have been successful for years. Maybe they start being a little less successful because there's so much competition. And so people are trying to find other ways. How do I reduce my cost? How to make this more efficient, for my client and myself? Maybe people don't want to come. Maybe all the people would come to a seminar. I've saturated that market. Maybe I need to find people who, want to find a different way, things like that. Online courses started to be, online courses or courses in universities started to pick up too. I know a bunch of advisors who were trying to get in to teach classes instead of doing seminars. So they went from the sales-oriented seminar to the half educational, half sales, now all the way to purely educational. And I know advisors who built really great businesses getting in and teaching courses where they don't sell themselves. They said it's unbelievable how many people, when I established myself as the expert who I didn't sell to, will come to me and say, well, you're the one who taught me this, so why wouldn't I go to you? And that to me, I mean, that was as recent. One of the guys who I've seen have a lot of success in that, I met at a conference in Vegas not too long ago, and we were out for dinner, and he was just telling me about the evolution of that. And it's unbelievable how much of an impact that type of approach, that thought leadership approach, had in his business over the years. And he had told me he had 6,000 people over like 10 years who had gone through his course.
Wow.
He was frustrated at the time because he's like, I haven't leveraged this well enough, but it was so good that he didn't at the time need to. But then he wanted to after it all happened. So we were talking about how to do that. Anyway, that's a pretty cool story. But, a guy, somebody being leading edge in that regard and how much of an impact that marketing tactic, being a thought leader, different platform that he used. But man, with the platforms we have available now, you can reach way more people on their terms for free, from them, because he was charging people to come to this course. So that was the end of level 4. I know that we can pull and move stuff around here. It's going to be people that say niche marketing really happened way earlier. But that's fine. That's a good, feel free to reach out and say hi or keep it to yourself, whatever you want to do. But
well, hold on there.
I don't want them to keep it themselves.
Well, I don't either. I'd love for this to be a conversation because I don't believe that it was part of the greater consciousness of financial services professionals. There were absolutely people who figured that out early on in their personal evolution, but in the evolution of advisor brand across the 300,000 advisors, I definitely think it was much later in the process.
I think that niche marketing really evolved from special advisors, like advisors who were so savvy as business owners that they either stumbled upon or figured out through the resourcefulness that if they went after a certain vertical, they could indeed infiltrate and have a lot of success. And I think it was more of that than it was marketers coming in and pitching that. And from my experience, the advisors who had done that, they weren't people who did that on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They figured it out. Maybe they had read a book or read an article or something like that that inspired them, but they were really figuring out that they're being very resourceful on their own.
Well, and I think that part of it was advanced client segmentation or client segmentation, because you would start really diving into your book of business as a business owner. And I think my old boss was one of the first people who really brought that to the masses from a financial advisor perspective. When he would say, hey, look, you need to dive in and see who, what your top clients have in common, all of the sudden, and he did that with what he referred to as passion prospecting. But now we're looking at it a lot more in this evolution of that, because that was a good 10, 15 years ago. Now we're looking at it as, okay, now how do you bring that as a niche?
Right. And that was Peak Systems, and that was Ron Carson.
Yeah.
That you're referring to when you were one of his lead coaches.
Yeah.
Way back when. So, I'm throwing that in there because we're going to tag that, right? Because we're talking about, this is another tactic for everybody listening. Sometimes you include people, you think you're bringing up competitors. What you're doing is you're engaging their audiences when you throw a tag in your LinkedIn thing about your podcast.
Well, and honestly, he changed everything for advisors, right? And so, I still have, and this, Kirk, because I bring it up all the time, I just have so much absolute respect for what he's built and what he's contributed to from an advisor standpoint. Okay, so
ass kissing.
Well, thanks. Are we done with level 4? We on to level 5?
Level 5, yes.
All right, hit me.
I have some fun there. We haven't laughed yet in this one. So
I have. You haven't. I've giggled a few times.
Yeah, I know. I'm dialed in, baby. So
go ahead.
Level 5, the only thing I have in level 5 is the advent of video and YouTube and social media, and then how people were leveraging those on their website. Remember when it was really, really cool to have your social feed on your website?
Oh, totally.
That was the thing.
Yeah.
You know what I haven't talked about, which is unbelievable because it was one of my biggest pet peeves my entire career, is calculators on websites. That was credibility way back then.
I know. I remember that.
I'm serious. That's one of my biggest pet peeves ever in my entire career, is when advisors would put calculators on their sites. Not one calculator that was specific to a niche thing they wanted to accomplish, which actually might have made sense. But it was every calculator. And it was like, isn't this what you're hiring me to do? Like, why are these here? Is it self-directed financial planning? I don't get it, right? It was worse than having the same articles on everybody's website, having those calculators in my mind. Anyway.
Well, hold on. My biggest pet peeve was, because you're talking about level 5 with video here, was when you would go onto a website and like the dude or the lady would walk from off screen to on screen and immediately start talking to you and you couldn't stop it. That drove me crazy.
There were some really bad videos. And the thing about video is I don't think anybody was really properly trained. Although, lighting, professionalism, they got up there and sounded like every other advisor, which was the worst thing to do in my opinion. But I guess if you were in a certain area where people weren't even educated on using an advisor, it had some merit. But as far as, telling people what you really did and how you were different and what you cared about, your purpose and your why, things like that, advisors typically didn't do a great job of that. Or if they did, they dabbled in it so lightly that it didn't really get the job done. Or they just weren't good on camera. you know. And I've seen so many advisors record those types of videos that were in the garbage in a year. And if they weren't, they should have been, because advisors, marketing people were screaming at them, please take this off your website. It's not good. And one of the first videos I did like that was for a guy in Des Moines. And he wanted to just get up there and ad-lib it. And I was like, no. Not on my watch. Not if I'm involved. I hired a video company. We did some incredible light. This guy had an incredible office, which didn't hurt the videos. And he had a lot of charisma. But I created a system of cue cards. And I sat at the back of the room and I said, this is what you're going to say. I rehearsed it with him. I made it be stuff and jargon that he believed in so that he would be comfortable with it. And then I sat at the back of the room and I threw the clip card, just like you would on like the Tonight Show or something like that, right? Where they're cueing you. We didn't have a teleprompter, but I just sat there and flipped cards. And man, this was a lot of years ago. And it was a killer video. Like we did, I think, 3 or 4 of them, and they were absolutely fantastic. And I know he ran with those for years, but they were focused on differentiating him. They were about, his brand and things like that. And they were huge. Albeit they didn't last a long time because he got in trouble with the SEC, and that was all she wrote for him.
Well, I want to talk a little bit more about this kind of integration piece that you're talking about, because one of the pieces when it comes to video and integrating all of this stuff on your website with social plugins and things like that is there are still financial advisors out there who don't have responsive websites. So if you go to their website, it doesn't work on your tablet or your phone. This is the evolution of the brand, but this is the evolution of technology, and we're going to start talking a little bit more and get a little bit more deeper and utilizing technology in what Kirk is going to go to here. But everybody, if you have a website that you can't look at on your phone, that you have to like swipe in or pinch in or pinch out to read, please dump that website as soon as possible, because like 60% of web searches are now done on mobiles.
I'm so glad you just said that, because I missed that. Responsive websites was a huge evolution, because advisors really had to go from doing it themselves or using small web shops to these big ones. Compliance also drove that too, right? Compliance went crazy. I got to write compliance in here. When did compliance go crazy?
Since the dawn of time.
No, man. No way. Compliance has always been there, but compliance went really crazy, I think so, probably in level 5, which is really in the 2000s. And this one we could debate a lot. I do remember getting rejections and stuff like that, or learning from that earlier. But the thing about compliance now is that the fear and the reality that with advances in marketing technology, or MarTech, is that so many advisors were in so many more places, right? And it could all be captured, right? It wasn't like you were sending out, letter campaign to 5,000 people. Now the whole world could see what you were doing. So the implications, or the level of the implication that something could go wrong and how wrong it could go escalated, a million times.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was in level 5, but around that stage, and being able to do video and throw it on YouTube, that was part of the advent of that. That contributed to that for sure. So for level 5, I've got video, social media, responsive websites, and compliance. And social media I had under video, but really it's its own category.
Yeah.
Social media, early on, compliance regulations made people develop tools right away, because everybody said, no, you're not using social media. People still did. Advisors still did, here and there. But until those systems were in place and compliance was running that, social didn't really start to take off. But the problem is when social started to take off, and you know well because you wrote a book about it, right? The Bible for social media for financial advisors, like 10 years ago?
Yeah.
When did you write that? What year?
8 years ago.
Only 8 years ago. Wow.
Only 8 years ago. Dude, the funny thing about that is we were before our time. When Crystal and I wrote that book, it was, I mean, Crystal and I were talking about things that compliance ended up squashing, and then they said okay, and I mean it was just nuts, man.
So it was craziest thing about writing that book is, and when we're talking about evolution, and you've told me this many times, is how quickly stuff in that book became stalemated, right? That needed to be changed because social media, compliance, everything was evolving so fast. But there's still a lot of really great points in that book about like fundamental things that have never changed. But that was one of the scary things. I'm sure when you were writing, you were thinking, man, how long is this screenshot of, this LinkedIn going to be relevant? But that's the thing about social media is that stuff changes, but how you leverage it, that hasn't really changed that much.
No. Right. No, and even the content stuff that we talked about, utilizing things like the search algorithms and the advertising and all of the things that Crystal and I talked about in the book are still absolutely 100% applicable today. It's just the screenshots themselves, the user interface has changed so much. Okay, so that's level 5. Let's start talking about like the future of the evolution. Like where do we see things evolving towards?
Yeah, I think we're really at the advent of the next era, and that is podcasting, because it's such an incredibly versatile medium, and because it's been one of those mediums for like globally or historically that has had a really what's the right word? Steady growth. Mm-hmm. It's not trendy, not fatty. It's had a really steady growth, which I think speaks a lot to it. But marketers and advertisers are starting to recognize, and we said this ad nauseum, that podcasting is the holy grail of communication because it's so intimate. And, look at us, having fun, showing our personality, talking about the things that we know that we don't always, spend the time to write articles on. We try to do that too, but it's a wonderful platform, right? You can be listening to us hands-free in your car while you're cooking dinner, while you're having a glass of wine on the back porch, get some time to kill, commuting to or from your car, train, whatever it is you're taking, while you're on a plane, flying to business meetings, maybe not, hopefully not vacation, but sometimes that's when advisors do their best thinking for work is when they're on vacation,
right?
And they actually, if they enjoy it and it relaxes them, that's fine. But podcasting, is really at the advent of making a dent. Video is still there, right? It's evolving. There's other things that are evolving in this level 6, but podcasting is a huge one. Multimedia platforms that make you better at social media are evolving, and or digital marketing. So, there's companies like, there's MarTech companies like HubSpot and things like that, and there's CRMs and that are, really popular with financial planning industry like Redtail and Salesforce and other that have all the way have made their own advancements in technology to help your marketing be better. But a company I've noticed, AdvisorStream, and what they're doing, they're finding different ways, although kind of have some old school kind of rules to them that are creating a difference for advisors and making it easier but still authentic to a degree, ways to connect with their audience. Snappy Kraken just won an award with Wealth Management or Informa, and their big gala they had last week. And I'm sure Robert Sophia is super proud of earning that. So that was a big deal for them. And Snappy Kraken is really a digital marketing platform that allows you to create campaigns and set stuff that hits people on like an omnipresent level, right? Social, email, connected to your website, events, things like that. So he's got a really cool system for doing that. And that's just one of those things. There are other systems, but these people are, people that we know are familiar with their systems. And podcasting can play a huge role in those systems, right? One of the things that podcasting has done, and we talked about this just before we get on the call, is if Matt and I and our company, Top Advisor Marketing, can make podcasting, can make an impact on how many advisors embrace podcasting and push it out to the world. We feel like we're partially responsible. And maybe this is being a little bit arrogant, but we want to be more responsible for being historically significant in changing the mindsets and how advisors communicate with clients.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Enough said?
I just absolutely. That's our whole focus in life is for us to help advisors get their voice out in the marketplace, right? And that's it. I mean, you can do it with us, which we'd love. But if you don't, then download our white paper on how to start your own financial podcast, or the book that we've got coming out here relatively soon is going to outline a whole bunch of stuff like that, and or just listen to our podcast now. We have basically over the last 200 episodes told you exactly how to start your own podcast and all of the different things that you need. But okay, Kirk, to wrap up today's podcast, hold on.
Podcasting, I know you want me to be done because we're going on here, but podcasting changes the way that you can leverage marketing tools. Yeah. Because you have your own content. Just think of what we're doing with podcasting right now. We're turning it into content. We're multiplying it into little piece of content, little video snippets that promote each podcast. We're taking quotes, either audio snippets or doing quote memes. Right, so you can do all these cool things, and then you can leverage them through these other tools like Snappy Crack and Advisor Stream, all kinds of other, social media and digital marketing tools. That's level 6, and I know what you're pushing me toward, which is level 7, right?
Well, the last 2 levels here is where things are going, and I think if we're talking about evolution, part of what we do, and I think what we do very, very well as a company, is we're always forward-looking. What is the next step? Who has the next step, and how can advisors take that next step? So
level 7 is MicroInfluence, and we coined this term here at Top Advisor Marketing. And here's the definition, or our definition, which is a microinfluencer is an advisor or a firm, specific because that's who we're speaking to, that owns their expertise, a specific expertise, with a specific audience in a specific region. This is kind of taken everything that's evolved, dumping it into one ideal or concept and saying, bring all these things together. So now level 7 is about finding the most synergistic marketing, branding tactics, branding, everything that you can find, creating the synergistic strategy where all these things help each other, and therefore create way more business in your practice and your marketing than you could have done if you were doing them on their own. And that focus of aiming towards philosophically trying to be a micro-influencer is what marketing has really evolved into. I think we might have been doing it all along, but now it's a thing. And hopefully everybody understands what we mean by micro-influence, embrace it, and make that the goal for your marketing going forward. Make that the focus. How do I be that, that advisor who owns that expertise, that specific expertise with a specific audience in a specific region? And if you can do that, you'll achieve a ton of momentum and success in your marketing and your business.
And we'll make sure that we have all of the information on that. Because obviously we have a great solution for you, but at the same time, we also need to pay very, very close attention that there are going to be other people who are going to be able to help you with the micro-influence. If you can give me just 1 second, Kirk, to make some closing comments after yours. What do you got? What do you got for the closing comments?
Marketing has evolved. And if you can't keep up and if you can't push the envelope, you're going to get left behind. And it's becoming more and more critical for an advisor to be successful in their business, to differentiate themselves, to have a voice, to be your own loud. And so you can't take it lightly. You need to figure out how you're going to embrace the next level or era of marketing for financial advisors and jump on board and figure it out for yourself.
And if you do want to know more about this, make sure that you check out our website. All right, Kirk, you ready to wrap it up?
Yep.
All right. Well, if you have not subscribed to the podcast, make sure you click that subscribe now button below. That way, every time we come with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. And if you know somebody who needs to hear the advisor evolution of the advisor's brand, please make sure that you share this. If you have any ideas for us, all you have to do is send me a quick email at matt@topadvisorm.com, and I'll be more than happy to talk to you about your ideas, or if you have any guest ideas too, that would be super awesome. So for everybody at Top Advisor Marketing, this is Matt Halloran and Kirk Lowe. Thanks, Kirk.
Thanks, Matt. Bye, everybody.
Are you ready to change the way you communicate with your clients? Are you tired of being the best kept secret in your area? Learn how to become a prolific online influencer, attract more ideal clients, and grow your business. Contact us today and see what the power of podcasting can do for your business. Click on the Contact Us link on our website at topadvisormarketing.com and set up a call to learn more. Follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook for more updates and information.
This was brought to you by Iris.xyz, a platform helping financial professionals become better in business and life through new media and new voices. Visit them and learn more at iris.xyz.